The sun had barely begun to rise over the horizon when the farmer stirred in his small, modest cabin. The wind moved softly across the dry prairie, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and wildflowers. He rubbed his tired eyes and sat up on the edge of the bed, staring at the wooden floorboards as if they might tell him a story he had long forgotten. Life had been quiet for many years. Every day was a repetition of the last, and yet the farmer had come to accept it. The fields were his companions, the cattle his family, and the empty rooms of the cabin a silent reminder of the loneliness that clung to him like a shadow. He had worked hard to make the farm survive. The land was unforgiving, and the seasons often brought challenges that tested his patience and skill. Droughts had threatened to dry up the crops, and storms had torn through the prairie more than once, leaving behind broken fences and scattered hay. Still, he rose each morning, ready to meet the day, ready to face whatever the land would throw at him. There was a quiet pride in his work, a satisfaction that no one could take away. Yet deep down he longed for something more. As he stepped outside to check the fields, the early morning light painted the horizon in soft shades of orange and pink. The farm was calm, almost serene, and for a moment he felt a sense of peace he rarely allowed himself to feel. That peace was broken, however, when he noticed a figure standing near the edge of the barn. At first he thought it might be one of the neighbors, passing by to say hello, but as he drew closer, he realized it was a young woman, unlike anyone he had ever seen. She was an Apache woman, her dark hair tangled from travel, her clothes worn and dusty from the long journey she had clearly undertaken. Her eyes, dark and wide, seemed to hold both fear and determination. She looked at him with caution, as if she were unsure whether he was friend or foe. The farmer stopped in his tracks, unsure of what to do. His first instinct was to turn her away. After all, a woman alone on the prairie could mean trouble, and he knew well the dangers that came with harboring a stranger. Yet, as he looked into her eyes, something shifted inside him. She seemed lost, weary, and in need of help. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his voice breaking the quiet morning. She did not answer, only shifting slightly, her gaze flicking toward the cabin as if asking silently for permission to approach. The farmer hesitated, then nodded toward the door. "Come inside. You can rest for a while." She moved slowly, cautiously, until she reached the cabin. Inside, the air was warm from the wood stove, and the smell of last night's cooking lingered faintly. He offered her a place near the fire, and she sank to the floor with a quiet sigh, relief evident in the way her shoulders relaxed. The farmer watched her for a moment, unsure how to bridge the gap between them. She spoke little English, and he knew nothing of her language. Words would not easily come, and yet somehow communication began. Days passed, and she stayed on the farm. At first, the farmer did not know how to treat her. He offered food and water, and she accepted without complaint, always polite, always quiet. She helped around the cabin in small ways, sweeping the floor, tending to the fire, fetching water from the well. Each gesture was simple yet meaningful. The farmer began to notice the small details, the way her hands moved with care, the way she watched the animals with quiet curiosity, the way she seemed to understand the rhythm of the farm without a single word being spoken. Despite the language barrier, a bond slowly began to form. They would sit together in the evenings, the farmer tending the fire while she watched silently, occasionally glancing up with a soft smile that conveyed gratitude more than words ever could. He found himself talking to her, telling her about the work in the fields, the challenges of raising the cattle, the storms that had swept through the land. She listened attentively, her eyes reflecting understanding and empathy. It was a strange comfort, having someone to share his thoughts with, someone who did not judge him for his quiet life or his solitude. Yet, as he began to feel the warmth of her presence, the farmer also felt a growing tension. He knew the world outside the farm would not approve of his companionship with an Apache woman. The thought of neighbors, strangers, and society's expectations weighed on him. Still, he could not bring himself to turn her away. There was something in her, something that stirred emotions he had long kept buried. Her strength, her resilience, and her quiet dignity captivated him. Each day he found himself looking for reasons to see her smile, to hear her soft laughter, to share moments that transcended words. The woman, for her part, began to trust him in small ways. She shared the knowledge she had of the land, the plants, the water sources, and even some skills from her own culture that helped around the farm. She worked silently but efficiently, never asking for recognition, never demanding attention. Her presence was a gift, a quiet blessing that changed the rhythm of the farmer's days. For the first time in many years, he felt a spark of connection, a sense of life beyond the lonely walls of his cabin. Evenings became a time of quiet intimacy. They would sit near the fire, the farmer talking softly about the past, about losses and memories, while she listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally offering a gentle smile or a reassuring glance. He found himself longing for these moments, waiting for the sun to dip below the horizon so they could share the simple comfort of companionship. The Apache woman, too, seemed to find solace in the quiet routine, in the safety and predictability of the farm, in the gentle kindness of a man who offered her shelter without expectation. The story of their early days was not without challenges. Misunderstandings arose due to the language barrier, and moments of tension flared when customs or habits clashed. Yet each challenge was met with patience and care. The farmer learned to read her expressions, her gestures, and her quiet cues. She learned to anticipate his needs, to assist without being asked, to share in the labor and the life of the farm without fear. Slowly, a rhythm formed, a rhythm of mutual respect, quiet companionship, and an unspoken bond that grew stronger with each passing day. The farmer's loneliness, once a heavy burden, began to lift. The prairie no longer seemed empty, the fields no longer silent. There was life in the quiet moments, warmth in shared work, and a subtle joy in the simple presence of another human being. He found himself watching her as she moved through the farm, noting the careful way she handled the animals, the patience with which she tended the small garden, the way she paused to listen to the wind or the birds. Each small detail deepened his admiration, and he could not help but feel a growing respect and affection that went beyond mere gratitude. By the end of the first part of their story, a delicate understanding had formed. They were two strangers from very different worlds, yet they had found a connection that defied language, culture, and circumstance. The farmer had discovered that life could hold surprises, that the quiet monotony of his days could be broken by unexpected companionship, and that the heart could awaken even after long years of solitude. The Apache woman, for her part, had found a place of safety, a man whose kindness was unwavering, and a chance to begin again in a world that had not always been kind. The mornings on the farm now held a quiet promise. Each day brought small joys, gentle discoveries, and the slow unfolding of a bond that neither fully understood, but both felt deeply. The farmer had come to see her as more than a visitor, more than a guest. She was a presence that changed the very air of the farm, that brought warmth to the cold mornings, and that made the long hours of labor feel lighter. And for the Apache woman, the farm had become a sanctuary, a place where trust could grow, where patience and care were met with understanding, and where the possibility of something more, something quietly profound, began to take root. In the golden light of one early morning, as they worked side by side in the fields, the farmer realized that the days of loneliness were slowly fading. He did not yet know what the future held, nor did he fully understand the depth of his feelings. But for the first time in many years, he felt hope, connection, and a quiet anticipation for what lay ahead. The forbidden nature of their bond, the dangers, the societal expectations, the unspoken rules of their worlds, lingered at the edges of his mind. Yet at that moment it did not matter. What mattered was the presence of another human being, the warmth of shared labor, and the silent acknowledgement that something extraordinary had begun. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between the farmer and the Apache woman continued to grow. Each morning the prairie seemed to welcome them with its golden light, and the wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers and earth, mingling with the warmth of their shared life. The farmer began to notice the small ways she had changed his world. The farm no longer felt empty. The fields seemed alive with purpose, the animals calmer, and even the sunrises more vibrant. She had become a part of the rhythm of the land, her presence weaving quietly into the fabric of his daily life. They worked together as a team. She helped him mend fences, gather firewood, and tend to the crops. He showed her how to care for the livestock, how to read the weather, and how to anticipate the needs of the farm. Though they still spoke little in words, communication had grown in other ways. A nod, a glance, or a simple gesture could convey meaning that words could not. The farmer discovered that she had a sharp mind and keen intuition. She seemed to understand the land instinctively, knowing where to plant, when to water, and how to care for the animals in ways he had not thought of. Her knowledge, gained from years of living close to the earth with her people, was a gift that brought new life to the farm. The evenings were their most cherished moments. After long hours of work, they would sit together near the fire, sharing a quiet meal. The farmer found himself talking more freely, telling her stories of his childhood, the struggles he had faced on the farm, and the loneliness that had been his companion for so many years. She listened attentively, her dark eyes reflecting understanding and empathy. Sometimes she would offer a soft smile, a gentle nod, or a look that conveyed her own thoughts without a single word spoken. Slowly, he began to feel that he was no longer speaking into emptiness, that someone was truly hearing him, caring for him, and accepting him as he was. Despite the comfort they found in each other, the reality of the world outside the farm began to intrude. Neighbors started noticing her presence, and whispers followed. Some looked with curiosity, others with suspicion. The farmer knew that society would judge, that their companionship was unconventional, perhaps even forbidden in the eyes of those around them. He felt the weight of these expectations pressing down, but the more he considered them, the more he realized that he could not let fear dictate his actions. The Apache woman had become more than a guest. She had become someone he could not imagine living without. The woman, too, began to open up. She shared fragments of her past, stories of her tribe, and lessons learned from her family. She taught him how to identify plants that could heal wounds, how to find fresh water during dry spells, and how to work with the land in harmony. In return, he taught her the skills he had honed over years of farming, the techniques that kept the crops thriving, the methods to care for the livestock, and the knowledge to survive the harsh frontier. They learned from each other, not only surviving but thriving together. The shared labor created a bond deeper than words, built on trust, respect, and the understanding that each depended on the other in ways neither had anticipated. As the weeks passed, the farmer found himself thinking of her constantly. Her presence filled his thoughts, and he realized with surprise that he was developing feelings he had long thought impossible for a man of his solitude. He admired her strength, her resilience, and the quiet grace with which she carried herself. There was a dignity in her silence, a courage in her endurance, and a warmth in her simple gestures that stirred something deep within him. For the first time, he felt the stirrings of love, a feeling that was both exhilarating and frightening. The Apache woman, in her own way, responded to him. She watched him with an intensity that suggested curiosity and care. She laughed softly at his small jokes, helped him with a gentle hand when he struggled, and sometimes simply sat nearby, offering the comfort of her presence. She had endured hardships, and he could see the layers of experience in her eyes. Yet in his company she seemed to find peace. The farm, once a place of quiet work and isolation, had become a sanctuary for both of them. Challenges still arose. There were moments of misunderstanding when cultural differences clashed, when language barriers created confusion, or when routines differed. But each challenge was met with patience and care. The farmer learned to anticipate her needs, to recognize her gestures, and to respect the traditions she carried with her. She learned to understand his ways, to adapt to the rhythms of the farm, and to trust him more with each passing day. The difficulties they faced only strengthened the bond between them, proving that their connection could endure hardships and grow stronger under pressure. The community's whispers grew louder, yet the farmer felt an increasing sense of defiance. He had lived his life under the judgment of others, but now he realized that true courage came from standing by his convictions, from protecting the one who mattered to him most. He began to accept that their bond, though unconventional, was meaningful and vital. He no longer worried about the opinions of strangers or neighbors. The woman had become essential to his life, and he was determined to honor that. One evening, after a long day of work in the fields, they sat together by the fire. The prairie wind moved softly outside, rustling the tall grass and carrying the faint scent of wildflowers. The farmer looked at her and noticed the way her eyes reflected the dancing flames, how her lips curved in a gentle, almost imperceptible smile. In that moment, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not only for her presence but for the way she had transformed his life. She had brought warmth, companionship, and understanding to a heart that had known only loneliness for far too long. The Apache woman, sensing his thoughts, reached out and placed her hand gently on his. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. In that touch there was trust, connection, and a quiet acknowledgement of the feelings that had grown between them. The farmer felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of awe and tenderness, and realized that he could no longer deny the depth of his affection. She was no longer simply a visitor or a guest. She had become a part of him, a presence that he cherished more than he could express in words. As the seasons changed, their life together grew richer. Spring brought new growth to the fields, and the couple worked side by side to plant crops and care for the land. Summer brought long, warm days where they labored together under the sun, sharing moments of laughter and quiet conversation. Autumn painted the prairie in gold and red, a reminder of the cycles of life, while winter brought cold winds and snow, testing their endurance and resilience. Through every season, their bond remained steadfast, strengthened by shared experiences and the simple joys of life together. The farmer began to notice the subtle ways she had influenced him beyond the farm. He found himself more patient, more reflective, and more appreciative of life's small wonders. Her presence encouraged him to see beauty in the ordinary, to find joy in routine, and to embrace the unexpected. For the Apache woman, the farm offered stability, safety, and a chance to rebuild her life. She began to trust not only the farmer but the world around her, finding hope in the simplicity and honesty of their shared existence. One crisp morning, as they worked together in the fields, the farmer realized that the woman had become indispensable to him. He could no longer imagine the farm without her, the days without her quiet laughter, or the evenings without the warmth of her presence. The forbidden nature of their bond, the societal rules and expectations that hung over them, was still there, but it no longer held power over him. He had discovered that the heart's truth was more important than the judgment of others. In the quiet moments before dusk, as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, the farmer understood something profound. Life had given him an unexpected gift, one that he had not sought but could not now live without. The Apache woman had become his companion, his friend, and the quiet center of his world. And though the path ahead was uncertain, he was ready to face it, knowing that together they could overcome any obstacle. Their story was one of patience, trust, and gradual understanding. It was not a tale of sudden romance, but of a deepening bond built on respect, shared labor, and quiet moments of connection. The farmer had learned that love could emerge in the most unexpected ways, that companionship could transform loneliness into purpose, and that courage sometimes meant standing against the world to protect what mattered most. As the night settled over the prairie, with the stars shining bright above, the farmer and the Apache woman sat together in the cabin, sharing the warmth of the fire. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, only the steady, comforting presence of each other. And in that presence they found something extraordinary: a quiet love, a deep connection, and the promise of a future built together. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, the prairie, once silent and empty, now hummed with life and possibility. The farmer had awakened to a gift he had not expected, and in embracing it he had discovered not only love but also the courage to live fully and authentically. The Apache woman, too, had found a place to belong, a man who valued her, and a life where hope and trust could flourish. Together they faced the world, united by a bond that neither time nor circumstance could break.